All right, my friend, let's sit with this one for a moment. Life's all about balance, right? But here's the thing, what if our constant chase for pleasure, for that next hit of happiness or convenience, isn't actually making us free? What if instead it's trapping us in ways we barely notice? Let's be real, how often do we think we're making choices for ourselves, but in reality, we're just following some invisible script written by our cravings and distractions? This is where Aldous Huxley steps into the conversation. Huxley wasn't just an author, he was a visionary. In his book Brave New World, he painted this eerie picture of a society that was addicted to pleasure, so much so that people willingly gave up their freedom. No one was forced into submission. Instead, they were lulled into it by comfort, by entertainment, by a drug called soma that kept them happy and compliant. No oppression, no violence, just people choosing their chains because they were distracted by constant satisfaction. Now let's bring that idea into today's world. Modern slavery isn't chains and whips, it's notifications, endless scrolling, binge watching, and the pursuit of the next thing that makes us feel good for a moment. It's being caught in a cycle of dopamine hits where we're too distracted to ask the bigger questions. Am I living the life I truly want? Am I free? Here's the crazy part. Pleasure isn't inherently bad, of course not. We're wired to seek it out, to enjoy life. But Huxley was warning us about what happens when we make pleasure the center of our lives, when we chase it blindly without asking what it's costing us. Because when you really think about it, there's a difference between happiness and fulfillment. One is quick and fleeting, the other is deep and lasting, but it often requires effort, discomfort, and facing the things we'd rather avoid. So here's where we're headed. First, we're going to dig into what Huxley was trying to tell us about pleasure and how it can be used to manipulate us. Then we'll look at the traps of modern life, the ways we've become slaves to our own desires without even realizing it. And finally, we'll talk about how to break free. Because the truth is, freedom doesn't come from avoiding pain or chasing constant highs. It comes from living with intention, from choosing meaning over mindless satisfaction. By the end of this, I hope you'll see that the pursuit of pleasure isn't the problem. It's the unexamined pursuit of it that's the real danger. And when you can pause, reflect, and ask yourself what you truly value, that's when you start taking your power back. So let's dive in. This is going to get real and it's going to get deep. But trust me, it's worth it. Let's figure this out together. All right, my friend, let's dive into Aldous Huxley's vision and why it's so eerily relevant today. Huxley's Brave New World wasn't just a work of fiction, it was a warning. He imagined a society where people weren't oppressed by force but controlled by pleasure and distraction. Think about that for a second. No bars, no chains, no violence. People didn't need to rebel because they didn't even realize they were enslaved. They were too busy being happy in a world that made sure they never faced discomfort, never questioned their lives, and never sought deeper meaning. The cornerstone of this world was soma, a drug that numbed every unpleasant feeling. Feeling anxious? Take soma. Feeling angry? Take soma. Questioning your purpose? Take soma. It wasn't about solving problems, it was about numbing them, keeping people in a constant state of compliance, all while convincing them that this was happiness. Now let's pause and compare that to another famous dystopia, Orwell's 1984. In Orwell's world, control was external. People were forced into submission by fear, violence, and surveillance. But in Huxley's world, people weren't forced to obey, they wanted to. They willingly gave up their freedom because they were so distracted by pleasure and superficial happiness that they didn't care. And that's what makes Huxley's vision hit so close to home. Why does this matter today? Because, my friend, we're living it. Huxley's world doesn't feel like a distant possibility. It feels like a mirror. Look around. We're addicted to convenience, drowning in entertainment, and chasing instant gratification at every turn. Think about your phone for a moment. It's not just a tool, it's like a digital soma. Whenever we feel bored, lonely, or uncomfortable, what do? We scroll, we stream, we shop, we swipe. It's all designed to give us a quick hit of dopamine, just enough to keep us hooked, but never enough to make us feel fulfilled. Social media algorithms keep us glued to our screens, feeding us content tailored to our desires. Streaming platforms autoplay the next episode so we don't even have to make the choice to keep watching. Online shopping gives us the illusion of satisfaction, but that excitement fades as soon as the package arrives. Sound familiar? And let's not forget consumer culture. We're constantly being sold the idea that happiness comes from things. The latest gadget, the trendiest clothes, the perfect vacation. But here's the kicker. No matter how much we consume, it's never enough. There's always another ad, another product, another must-have. It's a cycle designed to keep us chasing, never stopping to ask, wait, do I even need this? What makes this even scarier is how subtle it is. We don't think of ourselves as being controlled, right? But that's exactly what makes Huxley's vision so powerful. The chains aren't visible because they're made of comfort and distraction. And the more comfortable we get, the less likely we are to question if this is all there is. Here's the truth, though. Pleasure isn't inherently bad. Technology, entertainment, and consumer goods aren't evil. The problem is when they become the center of our lives, when we use them to numb ourselves instead of face reality. Because when we do that, we lose the ability to think critically, to grow, to connect deeply with ourselves and others. Huxley's warning is clear. A society that prioritizes pleasure above all else will become shallow, passive, and easy to control. And if we don't wake up to that, we risk losing the very thing that makes us human. Our ability to seek meaning, to endure discomfort, and to strive for something greater than instant gratification. So here's my advice. Start paying attention to the little somas in your life. When you feel the urge to scroll, stream, or shop, ask yourself, what am I avoiding right now? It's not about cutting out all pleasure. It's about making sure it's not running the show. Huxley's world doesn't have to be our future, but breaking free starts with awareness. Let's keep digging deeper. You're on the right path. All right, let's get real about how modern slavery works, not with chains or oppression, but with pleasure. It's subtle, it's sneaky, and that's what makes it so effective. People aren't being forced into submission, they're being lulled into it, one dopamine hit at a time. Let's break it down. The role of pleasure. Here's the thing. Pleasure is one of the easiest ways to control people. Corporations and even governments know this. Why fight people's resistance when you can just distract them with entertainment, convenience, and shiny objects? It's a brilliant strategy. Keep people comfortable and entertained, and they'll stop asking questions. Think about endless streaming platforms. They're not just offering shows. They're designing an experience to keep you hooked. Autoplay, algorithmic recommendations, cliffhanger endings. These aren't accidents. They're calculated tools to keep you watching, clicking, consuming. It's not about giving you what you need. It's about keeping you engaged for as long as possible because your attention equals profit. And then there's fast food, cheap, tasty, and everywhere. It's engineered to hit all the pleasure centers in your brain, giving you instant satisfaction. But it's fleeting, right? You're hungry again in no time, so you go back for more. It's a cycle, and the more you feed into it, the harder it is to break free. Let's not forget the apps on your phone. They're designed to be addictive, to trigger dopamine spikes every time you get a notification or a new follower. The more you engage, the more the algorithm learns about you, feeding you content that keeps you scrolling. It's not about connection, it's about control. And the scary part? We choose to stay in this cycle, often without realizing we're doing it. The subtle shift. Here's what's really sinister. The shift from pursuing true fulfillment to chasing short-term gratification is so subtle that most of us don't even notice it. Fulfillment requires effort, patience, and sometimes discomfort. It's about working towards something meaningful, but short-term gratification? That's easy. It's quick, and it feels good in the moment. And because it's easy, we default to it. Why have a deep conversation when you can binge watch a show? Why cook a meal when you can order fast food? Why sit with your thoughts when you can scroll through your phone? This shift erodes our ability to delay gratification, which is one of the key ingredients for living a meaningful life. Instead of building something lasting, we settle for fleeting moments of pleasure that leave us feeling empty in the long run. Psychological impact. Now let's talk about the hedonic treadmill. Ever heard of it? It's the idea that no matter how much pleasure we chase, we eventually adapt to it and go back to our baseline level of happiness. That new phone you bought feels amazing for a week, maybe two. Then it's just another phone. The fancy dinner you had? Incredible in the moment, but it doesn't change your life. So what do? We chase the next thing and the next, thinking it'll finally make us happy, but it never does. The constant pursuit of these quick fixes also has another side effect. It erodes our ability to think deeply and engage meaningfully. When we're constantly bombarded with distractions, our minds don't have the space to reflect or question. Critical thinking takes a backseat to convenience, and we end up living on autopilot. We stop asking the big questions about who we are, what we value, and what really matters. Real-life examples. Let's get specific. Look at social media algorithms. They're not designed to help you connect with people or grow as a person. They're designed to keep you scrolling. The longer you stay, the more ads they can show you. And those ads? They're selling you the idea that happiness is just one purchase away. Whether it's a new gadget, a skincare product, or a vacation, the message is always the same. Buy this, and you'll feel better about your life. Then there's consumerism as a measure of success. We've been conditioned to believe that owning more equals being more. A bigger house, a nicer car, the latest tech. It's all tied to this illusion that our worth is based on what we have. But here's the truth. You can't buy your way to contentment. You can accumulate all the stuff in the world, but if you're not living a life aligned with your values, you're going to feel empty. Advertising plays a huge role in this. It's not just selling products, it's selling ideas. The idea that you're incomplete, that you're missing something, that you're not good enough as you are. And what's the solution? Their product. But once you buy it, the cycle starts all over again because the emptiness advertising exploits doesn't come from a lack of stuff. It comes from a lack of meaning. Why this matters. Here's why all of this is so dangerous. When we're constantly chasing pleasure and distraction, we lose our freedom. Not because someone's taking it away, but because we're giving it up willingly. We become slaves to our cravings, to our devices, to the corporations and systems that profit from our distractions. And the scariest part? Most of the time, we don't even notice it's happening. But awareness is the first step. Once you start noticing these patterns, you can begin to break free. It's not about rejecting all pleasure, it's about being intentional with it. Ask yourself, is this bringing me closer to the life I want? Or is it keeping me stuck? The more you ask that question, the more you can start reclaiming your time, your energy, and your freedom. We're not powerless in this. It all starts with awareness. Let's keep digging. You're on the brink of something big here. Let's figure out how to take back control. All right, let's really get into it now, my friend. We've talked about how the pursuit of pleasure can hook us and how modern systems are set up to keep us chasing. But let's take a hard look at what happens when we overindulge in pleasure. It's not just about what we gain in the moment. It's about what we lose over time. Loss of freedom. Here's the paradox that'll mess with your head. The more we chase pleasure, the more it ends up controlling us. What feels like freedom in the moment, scrolling endlessly, eating whatever we want, binging shows, is often just a shiny set of chains. We think, I'm doing what I want, so I'm free. But if you dig deeper, you start to see the trap. Take digital validation, for example. You post something and the likes roll in. Feels good, right? But then what happens? You want more. You start checking your phone constantly, waiting for that little dopamine hit. Before you know it, you're not posting because you have something meaningful to share. You're posting because you need the validation. That little screen isn't serving you anymore. You're serving it. Or think about fast food. It's convenient, it tastes good, and it hits all the pleasure centers in your brain. But over time, it doesn't just affect your health. It affects your mindset. You get used to shortcuts, to instant gratification. Cooking a meal feels like too much effort. You start to rely on the quick fix, and before long, you've lost the freedom to choose something better because the habit has taken over. Then there's escapism through entertainment. Streaming platforms, video games, social media, they're all designed to pull you in and keep you there. And sure, a little escapism is fine, but when it becomes your default way of dealing with stress or boredom, you're no longer in control. You're not choosing to escape. You're being driven by the need to avoid discomfort. Emotional and spiritual consequences. Here's where it starts to hurt. Pleasure without purpose leaves you empty. It feels good in the moment, but when the high wears off, you're right back where you started. Or worse, because now you've spent time, energy, or money chasing something that didn't actually fulfill you. It's like eating junk food when you're starving. It fills the space, but it doesn't nourish you. Overindulging in pleasure also erodes your resilience. When everything is easy and comfortable, you lose the ability to endure discomfort. And here's the thing, growth, meaning, and fulfillment often come from facing challenges, from doing the hard things. If you've trained yourself to avoid discomfort at all costs, you miss out on the deeper rewards that only come through effort. Discipline takes a hit too. When you're constantly chasing the next pleasurable thing, you stop thinking long-term. You lose the ability to delay gratification, to work towards something meaningful. And without discipline, you lose the ability to shape your own life. You start reacting to whatever feels good in the moment, instead of making intentional choices. Spiritually, this kind of shallow pleasure-seeking can leave you feeling disconnected from yourself, from others, and from something greater than yourself, however you define that. There's a reason people throughout history have talked about the value of stillness, reflection, and self-restraint. Those things create space for depth, for connection, for purpose. When you fill every moment with distractions, you lose that space. Social impacts. Now let's zoom out. What happens to a society that values pleasure above all else? It becomes shallow. When everyone is chasing their own comfort, there's less focus on community, on connection, on the things that actually hold us together. Look at how we interact with each other. Virtual relationships have replaced genuine connection in so many ways. We text instead of call. We scroll through updates instead of having real conversations. We measure relationships by likes, comments, and emojis. And the more we rely on these transactional interactions, the more disconnected we feel. We might have hundreds of friends online, but how many of them really know us? A pleasure-driven society is also incredibly vulnerable to manipulation. When people are focused on satisfying their immediate desires, they're easier to control. Politicians, corporations, and advertisers know this. Keep people comfortable, distracted, and entertained, and they won't notice what's happening behind the curtain. They won't ask the hard questions or demand better because they're too busy chasing the next hit of dopamine. And then there's the lack of depth. When society prioritizes comfort over growth, we lose the ability to have meaningful discussions, to solve complex problems, to build something lasting. Everything becomes surface level. Relationships, art, culture. It all gets watered down because depth requires effort. And effort doesn't feel good in the moment. So what can we do? The good news is it's not all doom and gloom. The first step is awareness, seeing the patterns, recognizing the traps, and being honest about where you're overindulging. Ask yourself, is this thing I'm chasing actually making me happy? Or is it just distracting me from the fact that I don't feel fulfilled? Then start small. Practice delaying gratification. Instead of scrolling the moment you feel bored, sit with the boredom for a minute. Instead of ordering fast food, cook a meal. Instead of binging another episode, pick up a book or call a friend. It's not about cutting out pleasure, it's about making sure it's not running your life. Rebuild your resilience. Do hard things. Choose the discomfort that leads to growth. It's not fun in the moment, but it pays off in ways that shallow pleasure never will. And reconnect with the things that bring real fulfillment. Relationships, purpose, creativity, spirituality. Those are the things that nourish you, that make life meaningful. Because here's the truth. Pleasure isn't the enemy. But when it's all you're chasing, you miss out on the bigger picture. Freedom, fulfillment, and connection don't come from avoiding discomfort. They come from embracing it. And once you start doing that, you'll realize that the life you've been chasing was right there all along, just waiting for you to wake up and take hold of it. All right, my friend, let's talk about something big. How to escape this modern slavery of pleasure and distraction. We've walked through how easy it is to get caught in these traps, but the good news? You don't have to stay there. Let's break it down step by step, starting with the most important one. Awareness. Awareness. Recognize the traps. First things first, you can't fix what you can't see. Modern slavery isn't about chains. It's about the things controlling your time, your thoughts, and your decisions. And let's be real. Most of us are so busy, so plugged in, that we don't even notice the traps we've fallen into. But here's the thing. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. That's where freedom begins. Start asking yourself some tough questions. What pleasures have you been chasing on autopilot? Are you glued to your phone, checking notifications every few minutes? Are you constantly ordering food because it's easy? Are you filling your free time with Netflix binges instead of doing something that actually fuels your soul? These things might feel harmless, and some of them are in moderation, but over time they control more of your life than you realize. This is where Huxley's wisdom hits hard. He warned us not to get too cozy with comfort. Why? Because comfort can be a trap. When we prioritize comfort and distraction, we stop looking for truth and depth. Huxley's advice? Seek what's real, look for meaning even if it's uncomfortable. Because truth and depth, those are what set you free. Practicing discipline, the power of small steps. Now that you're aware of the traps, it's time to take action. And let me tell you, escaping isn't about some grand overnight transformation. It's about small, deliberate steps that build over time. One of the most powerful tools you can use? Discipline. Discipline gets a bad rap sometimes because it feels restrictive. But the truth is, discipline isn't about punishment. It's about freedom. It's the ability to say, I'm in control of my choices, not my impulses. And the more you practice it, the more resilient you become. Here's a simple way to start. Practice delaying gratification. The next time you feel the urge to grab your phone, stop. Count to 10. Ask yourself, do I really need to check this right now? That pause is powerful. It's you taking back control, even in a small way. Other small steps? Digital detoxes. Pick one day a week to unplug from social media or limit your screen time. Spend that time doing something meaningful. Read, journal, go for a walk. Mindfulness. Spend 5 minutes a day sitting in silence. No distractions, no goals. Just be present with your thoughts. It sounds simple, but it can be life-changing. Reflection. Take 10 minutes at the end of each day to think about how you spent your time. What felt meaningful? What felt like a waste? Awareness grows through reflection. And don't underestimate the value of embracing discomfort. Whether it's a tough workout, cooking a meal from scratch, or sitting with a difficult emotion instead of distracting yourself, these moments build resilience. They remind you that you're stronger than your cravings or your need for constant comfort. Pursuing meaning over pleasure, this is the heart of it all. The key to escaping modern slavery isn't rejecting pleasure, it's shifting your focus to something deeper, meaning. Pleasure is fleeting. It feels good in the moment, but it doesn't last. Meaning, on the other hand, gives you something to stand on. It's fulfilling, grounding, and it grows over time. So what does it look like to pursue meaning over pleasure? It means prioritizing things like purpose, creativity, and connection. Let's break those down. Purpose. What drives you? What makes you feel alive? Maybe it's your work, a hobby, or a cause you care about. When you have a sense of purpose, the small distractions lose their power because you're focused on something bigger. Creativity. There's something magical about creating, whether it's writing, painting, cooking, or even problem-solving at work. Creativity pulls you out of passive consumption and into active engagement with the world. It's deeply satisfying in a way that scrolling through TikTok never will be. Connection. True connection isn't about likes or comments. It's about being present with the people who matter to you, having real conversations, sharing experiences, supporting each other. Connection reminds us that we're not alone and that life is about more than just ourselves. Here's the kicker. When you pursue meaning, you'll find that pleasure starts to take its rightful place. It's no longer the thing you chase to fill the void. It becomes a natural byproduct of a fulfilling life. That's the real win. Final thoughts. Escaping modern slavery isn't about rejecting all pleasure or making your life miserable. It's about taking back control, choosing what matters instead of letting distractions and comforts choose for you. It's about finding freedom not in doing whatever feels good in the moment, but in building a life that feels good over time. And you don't have to do it all at once. Start small, notice the traps. Take a moment to pause before giving in to the next distraction. Choose discomfort when it leads to growth. And most importantly, focus on the things that bring meaning to your life. Because here's the truth. Freedom isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about having the clarity and discipline to choose what's truly best for you. And once you start living that way, you'll realize that the freedom you've been searching for was always within reach. You just had to take the first step. Let's keep this journey going. You've got this, and I'll be here every step of the way. All right, my friend, let's take a step back and look at the brighter side of things. Huxley didn't write Brave New World just to scare us. He wrote it to wake us up. Beneath all his warnings, there was a thread of hope, a belief that we can break free if we choose to. So, let's dive into this idea of hope and how we can use it to shape a better future for ourselves and the world. Huxley's optimism, the potential for growth. Here's the thing about Huxley. Even though he painted a pretty grim picture of a pleasure-driven society, he didn't think we were doomed. Far from it. He believed that humans have this incredible capacity for self-awareness and growth. The problem isn't that we're incapable of seeing the truth. It's that we get too distracted to look for it. But once we start paying attention, once we make the choice to seek depth instead of distractions, everything changes. Huxley was a big advocate for mindfulness. And I don't mean just sitting cross-legged and meditating, though that's part of it. Mindfulness is about being present, about noticing what's happening inside you and around you. It's about stepping off the hamster wheel of endless distractions and asking, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Does this align with who I want to be? That kind of awareness is powerful. It's the first step toward reclaiming your freedom. He also believed in the power of self-discipline. Now, I know discipline doesn't sound sexy, but think about it. Discipline is what lets you say no to the things that don't serve you and yes to the things that do. It's the foundation for living intentionally instead of reacting to every impulse. And here's the cool part. Discipline isn't about restriction, it's about liberation. It's about creating the kind of life you actually want to live. And then there's intellectual curiosity. Huxley was all about it. He believed that when we stop asking questions, when we stop learning, we stagnate. Curiosity keeps us alive. It keeps us growing. It's what helps us see beyond the surface of things and dig into what really matters. When we cultivate curiosity, we're not just consuming, we're engaging, exploring, discovering. A new vision of freedom. Now let's talk about what freedom really looks like. I'm not talking about the shallow version of freedom where you can do whatever you want whenever you want. I'm talking about true freedom. The kind that comes from being in control of your own life, from making choices that align with your values and purpose. Imagine a world where people aren't ruled by distractions, where we're not constantly chasing the next dopamine hit. What would that look like? For starters, it would be a world where people value meaning over convenience, where we prioritize connection over consumption, and where we're willing to face discomfort in the pursuit of something greater. In this world, people wouldn't just be passive consumers, they'd be active creators. Instead of scrolling endlessly through social media, we'd be building things, solving problems, creating art, and nurturing relationships. Instead of numbing ourselves with constant entertainment, we'd be fully present in our lives, experiencing the richness of every moment. And here's the thing, this kind of world doesn't have to be a pipe dream. It starts with individuals, people like you, making intentional choices. When you start living a life rooted in meaning and authenticity, you inspire others to do the same. Your actions ripple out, creating a culture that values depth over distractions. Think about it. Every time you choose to have a real conversation instead of texting, every time you spend an evening creating instead of consuming, every time you choose to face a challenge instead of escaping it, you're planting a seed. And those seeds grow. They inspire the people around you to rethink their own choices. And little by little, those small personal shifts add up to something bigger. A cultural movement toward authenticity, connection, and purpose. Why this matters? Huxley's vision wasn't just about warning us, it was about showing us what's at stake. Yes, the world is full of distractions, and yes, it's easy to get caught up in the chase for shallow pleasures. But we're not powerless. We have the tools to break free. Mindfulness, discipline, curiosity, and a commitment to meaning. Here's the truth. The most valuable things in life, freedom, fulfillment, connection, aren't handed to us. They're earned through effort, through reflection, through the courage to step away from what's easy and toward what's meaningful. And when we do that, we don't just change our own lives, we create a ripple effect that can change the world. So my advice? Start small. Start with one choice, one moment of awareness, one step toward the kind of life you want to live. And keep going, because the world doesn't need more people chasing distractions. It needs more people like you, people who are willing to seek truth, to live authentically, and to inspire others to do the same. Huxley believed in our potential. And you know what? So do I. Let's make it happen. One choice at a time. You've got this, and I'm right here with you every step of the way. All right, my friend, let's bring this full circle. We've dug deep into the traps of pleasure, the subtle ways it can enslave us, and the tools we need to break free. Now, it's time to reflect, to ask the hard questions, and to take a step back to look at the bigger picture. Final reflection. Here's the truth. Pleasure itself isn't the enemy. It's not wrong to enjoy a good meal, to relax with a favorite show, or to scroll through your feed. We're human, and those moments of joy and comfort are part of what makes life sweet. But the problem comes when we let pleasure take the wheel, when it stops being a part of our lives and starts being the thing that drives everything we do. That's the danger Huxley was warning us about. It's not about rejecting pleasure. It's about being aware of how it shapes your choices. Are you chasing it mindlessly, letting it control you? Or are you making thoughtful decisions about what truly adds value to your life? The real problem isn't the pleasure, it's the unexamined obsession with it that slowly, quietly takes away your freedom. The path to freedom starts with a simple but powerful question. What do I truly value? It's not an easy question to answer, and it might take some time to figure out, but once you know, it changes everything. Because when you're clear on what you value, you can start aligning your choices with those values. And that's where real fulfillment begins. Not in chasing fleeting highs, but in living a life that feels authentic and meaningful. Now, I want to challenge you to take this idea and turn it inward. Start examining your relationship with pleasure. Take an honest look at your life and ask yourself, are my choices driven by convenience or by meaning? For example, when you reach for your phone, is it because you're truly connecting with others or because you're avoiding a moment of stillness? When you binge a show, is it because it genuinely enriches your life? Or is it an escape from something you don't want to face? What could I gain by embracing discomfort? Think about it. So much growth, fulfillment, and purpose come from doing the hard things. Whether it's starting a new project, having an uncomfortable but necessary conversation, or stepping out of your comfort zone. Those are the moments that shape you. What would happen if, instead of running from discomfort, you leaned into it? These questions aren't meant to make you feel guilty, they're meant to wake you up. Because awareness is the first step toward living intentionally. Once you start noticing the patterns, you can begin to change them. And that's when life starts to shift. Let me leave you with one of Huxley's most profound insights. Happiness is not achieved by the conscious pursuit of happiness. It is generally the byproduct of other activities. Think about that. Happiness isn't something you chase, it's something that comes naturally when you're living a life aligned with your values. When you're creating, connecting, contributing, and growing, happiness shows up as a result. But when you make happiness your sole focus, it slips through your fingers. Why? Because happiness isn't a goal, it's a byproduct of purpose. So here's where I'll leave you, my friend. Stop chasing and start choosing. Choose to be present. Choose to reflect on what matters. Choose to embrace the hard things that lead to growth. It won't always be easy, but I promise you, it will be worth it. The freedom, the fulfillment, the sense of being fully alive, it's all on the other side of that choice. You've got everything you need within you to live a life of meaning, depth, and joy. So take that first step, no matter how small. Start asking the hard questions. Start saying no to the distractions and yes to the things that truly matter. And remember, you're not alone in this. I'm right here with you, cheering you on every step of the way. Let's keep growing together.